If you were to tell me 17 years ago that I would still be a youth pastor in 2020, I don't think I would have believed you. But here I am hoping to go another 17 years. So what is it that gives us the strength and the fuel to go the distance in youth ministry? That's what we're talking about today on the Ministry Coach Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 14 of the Ministry Coach Podcast. We finally made it past episode 13.
Oh my gosh, what a milestone.
That's exciting.
What are we going to do to celebrate, Jeff?
We're going to
Is it a
celebrate
giveaway?
by having the 14th episode. My name is Jeff Lascola, and this is...
Kristen Lascola.
Okay, we have a different episode for you guys today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
This one I'm really excited about because we have a lot of other voices that are going to be speaking into this. We partner with some youth pastors that have put in some time. Mm-hmm. When I heard the years that some of them have been doing this, like sometimes I pride myself on like 16 years or 17 years if you count my volunteer year. Like, yeah. And these guys are saying like, this is my 30th, this is my 40th, this is my 50th year in youth ministry. So we're talking all about longevity in youth ministry today. And what can we do to set ourselves up to stick in there for the long haul, and what it takes to have the grit to be able to hold on, because we're inevitably going to have some ups and downs. There's my good friend, Zach Workin. He always would ask youth pastors questions. Tell us
on Youth Ministry Booster.
On Youth Ministry Booster. Little pluggy plug. But like, what was the night you almost quit? And we're going to have those days. We're going to have those nights. We're going to have those weeks, months, years, seasons in our life where it's like, I think I must have been meant to do something else because this is so hard. But we're going to give you some tips today. And then, like I said, you're going to hear from some of our partners about what helped them stay for the long haul and why it's worth it. So I think this should be a really useful, probably go back and listen to when you're in the dumps and you're in negative self-talk mode for years to come. Yeah,
because this is going to be a good one for really any season, I think, that you are in ministry, but especially those just starting out, but also as a good refresher for anybody that's, midway through their career in that 5, 10, 15 years, or one of the seasoned pros that 30 plus years, which is exciting. So definitely listen through this whole episode. You want to hear all those at the end.
They are good.
Yeah. This is a pull out your notepad and highlighter and pen and all that, or if you're more up to date, go with your phone and the notes app and all that stuff. So
that was cute.
Cute.
You're cute.
You're weird. All right, let's get right into it.
Like in a cute way?
Sure.
Words of affirmation are my love language.
Great.
Jeff.
You're nice. Here we go.
You're nice.
Good, kind, fun.
You're cool. Whatever. Okay, so I'm going to breeze through number one because I sound like a broken record on this, but we can't talk about ministry until we talk about relationship, because where does one end and the other begin? That's all ministry is a culmination of the sum of all your relationships, right? And that's totally what ministry is. So number one, invest in them. Invest in relationships, whether that is your volunteers, your staff, your coworkers, having mentors and friends outside of ministry. And the reason we have to put this at number one, and you guys are already like, oh, I know, okay, and you're going to skip ahead, but I will be brief here, but all I want to say is that you will get into times where your own voice is the worst voice and you will be inside your head too much, or maybe it's actually the enemy and maybe he is giving you these negative thoughts, giving you an odd and off perspective on something that's going on. And I don't know if you've had those weeks, but when you're just like, yeah, and that guy, and he did this, and then no one appreciates what I do here. And then I did this and nobody noticed. And then, oh, this ministry, everyone's so excited. And we have this negative self-talk. And so I think sometimes having those really healthy relationships of someone who can speak into those dark moments helps get us over the hump. And for me, Jeff, it's really been this guy.
I was hoping you'd say me because you're really setting it up to be me.
Really, Jeff, I feel like every time I come home and I start to talk to him about, like, I'm getting in my head and I start to say, like, oh, this is going on, and oh, and I just don't know. And then he just always has this great perspective of, like, didn't you tell me this 6 months ago? And, like, haven't you said that before? And you know that person and blah, blah, blah. And he'll just sort it out externally for me. And then I'm like, okay. And then I don't feel so bad, right? And I need this guy. But also,
I hope so. You're married to me.
I also have awesome leaders too that really have become my friends. And ministry is a place where we can't really say don't mix business with pleasure because it's all the same. Like, my leaders are my friends. And, you know, when I get kind of down, they are the ones who see me and speak life into me. Why do you look like you want to laugh at me? What's wrong? Do I have something on my face?
It's on your lip.
I feel it. Okay, I got it. I've been trying to get it this whole time.
This is the problem with doing a video-based podcast.
Yeah.
Well, not based, but we also have it on YouTube for those of you listening. In the 4K, you probably picked it up on her lip too. There's no real signal to give to somebody that says,
I have dry lips.
On your lip.
I have dry lips.
So I just look at you and want to laugh.
You just, like, are smirky, like, it's like, what? You're annoying. Okay. All right. So you guys know relationships are a big deal. You've got to have them. And I love the African proverb. I say it to myself a lot. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so a lot of us, sometimes you might be an introvert or have tendencies towards isolation, and you can run really fast alone, but you can't run far. So who are the people you're inviting into the heart and soul of your ministry to really know you and know what's going on? Where's your tribe, as they say? All right. So kind of along the same lines, number 2, longevity in youth ministry: invest in the organization, and the organization will invest in you if it's healthy. And if it's not, get out of there. Okay. So peace out. So this is having a family mentality. So many youth pastors, myself included, have at one time or another made the mistake of pouring 100% into their ministry, all of themselves, all of, you know, and they, like, wave the banner of their ministry and they wake up thinking about it, go to bed thinking about it. They're all about it, which is great because that's what you're paid to do. But at the same time, longevity in youth ministry, a lot of it comes down to who you are in the organization. And by organization, I mean the church, the big church that you're a part of, the overall church, because who are you aside from your own ministry? Where have you invested on the global scale? Where have you mentored other youth pastors on your team or helped another ministry? Like, I think we can get in a little bit of a silo mentality. Yeah. And I think what ends up happening there is we get a little bit too our ministry centric. And all we can see is that. And then it creates friction and tension with other leadership around us. So whether it just needs to be like this family mentality. And I think that's what keeps us around for the long haul, because if we feed into them, they will inevitably feed us. Again, if it's healthy, we want maybe some opportunities. We want to be a part of some bigger stuff. Well, this is a big lesson I've been learning lately, is like, where have I've been investing elsewhere? You know, it doesn't matter how big my ministry is. It doesn't matter how loyal my own volunteers are to me. If I'm not a dynamic part of the entire organization, they're just going to say, wow, good for you and your ministry. But your higher leadership cares about the church. They care about your ministry, but they also care about the church, and they want to see that you do too. And when you invest in them, then that return comes back to you.
On like a base level, would you say it's kind of the same thing as, I am more interested in you when you show interest in me?
Totally. And I think it's like that self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing. It's like, oh, well, they don't like me, so I'm not going to invest in them, or they're not for me, and I'm just going to silo and bury my head in my ministry, and we're going to rock it. And then they're like, oh, well, I guess he doesn't, or she doesn't care about the big church, and all they care about is their ministry. So we're not going to give them, why would we give them opportunities? Because all they care about is what's right in front of them. And so the only thing you can ever do in those relationships is you, like, control what you pursue. And so my big challenge for myself in the next few years is really to invest on a more global scale for the church, not just my ministry. I'm just seeing lately how important that is. Asking yourself the question, what is my reputation internally? So number 3, stop comparing yourself and your ministry internally and externally. So I work on a staff with like some of the best youth pastors I've ever seen, and there's a lot of them. It's not like I'm like the only junior high pastor. It's like there's like 17 of us because of how many campuses we have. Yeah. We all sit in a room together on Tuesdays and have a meeting, and I'm
one of the all-stars.
Yeah, I'm not like the... What's a really good sports person called? MVP?
An all-star.
An all-star.
An MVP.
You already said all-star.
A Pro Bowler.
So I'm not the all-star.
Right.
I'm an.
That's exactly what I just said.
I'm an all-star. Hi, I'm an all-star. And that sounded like a name all of a sudden. I'm an all-star, not the all-star. And some guys and girls can't handle that. They're like, I want to be the
guy, not one.
Exactly. And that's like a humbling place to be, in that, whoa, I play on a team with a lot of good people. Right. I'm not like some shining star. And I think we can get in our own heads too about like, why is our ministry not growing and theirs is? And maybe you are the youth pastor at your church, but you're comparing yourself constantly to the church down the street or in the next city over. And when I first started at our campus, one of the things that would just like make my skin crawl, but I couldn't like let on that it bothered me, was there was a bigger at the time youth group in our small town, and they would come up and they'll be like, have you ever met da 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 da? And it was the youth pastor at that other church. I'm like, yeah, I know him. He's so awesome. Yeah. Like their worship's like awesome. Like their camps are like so good. And I was always like, okay, then go there, you know? But like, it was my pride. And I was so like, okay, like, why do I always have to hear my students like, oh, we're so glad like we can go there on Friday and you're on Tuesday? And it just like made me feel like, well, guy, like, why, what do they have that I don't? And it like just breeds insecurity and discontent. And you're just like, if I can't be the best, then why do I even want to do this? Yeah. And that's a hard one for me. Like, I'm super competitive by nature. I don't want to be just like, yeah, you're good. You know, it's like, no, I want to be the best. Like, I want to be great. And sometimes we just compare ourselves, even just on a social media level too, of like what other youth groups are doing. But, you know, we don't always get the full version. And I think longevity in youth ministry comes down to honoring the call that God gave you at the place you're at and for the time that you
and
are
for those
there.
He's brought to you.
Right. And, you know, it's kind of, I don't know, like a slap in the face a little bit to wish to be somewhere else or not. Because I believe like God calls you specifically to a specific place for a specific time. You know what I mean? And like, okay, like what do I have? Where am I at? And let me maximize that and totally put roots down and invest completely in this place, instead of like constantly looking over the fence of like, oh, I should be there, or I should be there, or this place is lame, or, you know, it's just a hard place to be when we're always comparing our numbers, our students, all of that to somebody else. Because in either way, we don't have the full picture.
Right.
You know?
And also the idea that if there's a rainstorm, you want these people to be in a barn. It doesn't have to be your barn.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's a pride thing.
Church.
They're going to church.
Okay.
And I know it can be a pride thing to be like, I want it to be my church.
Totally.
But the bigger picture is, are they, when that rain is coming, are they going in a barn?
Yeah, as long as it's a good, healthy Bible teaching,
Exactly.
believing church, and you're like, okay, that's totally fine. And having that mindset of like the big C church,
Right.
not just like my local church, but like the church. Like we're all one, we're all in this together, you know, we're all the church. But that's hard. And that takes time and maturity. You know, when I first started being younger, that was really hard. You know, I was just kind of like, didn't even want to like acknowledge that another youth group existed.
Right.
You know, it was like, because you're trying to like make a name for yourself, which is totally the wrong mindset. But we are humans doing youth
Right.
ministry. Like the human and the spiritual are intertwined, and it's hard to separate.
Yeah.
You know, no matter how equipped we are still fighting the flesh every day. You know, it's rough. And lastly, the fourth one, know why you do what you do. Leadership is hard. It is not easy. And one of our senior pastors always says, guys, if you can or want to do anything else in life, go do that. If you can do anything else, go do that. But if you have come to the conclusion, this is what I'm called to do, I have to do this, there's nothing else I can do or want to do, then do it, but buckle up because it's hard. And I read this book a while ago. I think the author was Shaun White, and it was called 200 Pomegranates in an Audience of One. And it was about this guy who helped build Solomon's temple in the Old Testament. And he like did his finest work at like, I forget how many feet in the air it was, but the point was that he made all these ornate pomegranates at not at eye level and that nobody could see. They were on top of these pillars. And the author was making this point that he was doing his best work as an offering to the Lord, not to be seen by men, because nobody was going to pass by that stuff. And so knowing who our audience is and maybe our best work isn't always seen by everyone. I'm sure you, just like me, do a lot of things that your senior pastor will never know about. And sometimes that kills us because we're like, if they only knew, you know what I mean? But we have to remember who we ultimately work for and why we do what we do. And I think sometimes we can be a little over dramatic of like, youth ministry is so hard and I'm underappreciated. And while that is true, think about it this way. You get paid, I get paid to preach the gospel and talk about Jesus and draw students into a relationship with him and other Christians so that eternities are forever eternally changed.
That's huge.
Excuse me? Like, that's what my job is? Like, sometimes I'm like, oh, my job. And then all of a sudden my perspective changes and I'm like, I sometimes pinch myself like, wait, you're telling me I get paid a full-time salary to just fulfill the Great Commission, to go and preach the gospel? Like, yes, please. Like, that sounds like the dream job of it really does. Yeah. Like, I mean, it excites me so much, and I can't think of anything I'd rather do than preach the gospel. And here's just like, as we close it up, kind of to take on a somber tone, if we are going to stay in ministry for the long haul, one thing we really have to watch is who we are behind closed doors too, because too many of our fellow youth pastors, and it doesn't even have to be youth pastor, anyone in ministry, just realize the target you have on your back and the platform from which you can fall with one bad decision, whether that's sexual sin, whether that's pornography, whether that's drinking, whether that's some, financial kind of stuff, or just putting your ministry in front of your spouse. Like so many pastors and people in ministry just get into some kind of toxicity. So you really have to challenge yourself. None of us are immune to it, but man, the enemy would love to take us down, to make us look like a fool, to make the church look even more hypocritical than
Right.
the outsiders already think it is. And we know it's not. And we know humans are humans. And we know there's grace and mercy. And he is just ready to take down the workers,
Right.
and it's sad, but we have to totally be on our guard to live above reproach and ask ourselves the question, what is my personal relationship with Jesus like? Because some of us are so driven and so motivated that our ministries are actually taking the place of our relationship with God a little bit. We're just working and working and working instead of coming at it from like an overflow of our own spirituality. Because like we're going to hear from some of the experts in a second. One guy puts it really well of just, you can't teach what you don't already know from experience with Jesus. So what is your personal relationship with him like? Because the enemy is just ready to pounce on us. And I know you guys are like me, and your heart breaks every time you hear another story of someone succumbing to whatever it is, whatever that vice might be. I mean, there's a million examples, but the question also to ask is, do you love people or do you love your position? And the longer you stay in ministry, the harder that might be to answer, because we all get a little, we did an episode on compassion fatigue a while back. We all get a little jaded on people. We all get a little burnt by relationships. We all get a little emotionally and relationally exhausted at times, but we really like our jobs and we want to stick in there. But challenging ourselves to put the main thing, always the main thing, and that's people. It's always, always, always about people. And we have to stay fresh in our love and our compassion for them, because that is ministry. That's all there is. That's not an event. It's not a budget sheet. It's not something you plan or do. It's the people you invest in. That's ministry, because that is the only thing in this whole world that will last forever. That's the only thing that is eternal. It's people. Everything else is gone except for people, and our burden for them has to stay fresh. So with that, we're going to throw it to a few guys who, oh man, we can learn so much from them because they have lived this. They're, like we said in the beginning, been in ministry as a career, not just like, well, I never made it to senior pastor, but these guys went in knowing, this is what I'm going to do for life. And our senior pastor, Chris Brown, said to me the other day, he said, I think that there is no higher calling in our church than someone who chooses to stay in youth ministry for life. He said, I have more respect for that person than any other position in the church because it's the hardest and it is the most honorable. And he said, if you would sign a contract today telling me you'd stay here for another 10 or 20 years, he's like, I'd sign it, because that is what I value. It's not like, well, good for you working with kids, someday you'll be a real pastor. But we're going to dive into these guys. So give them a listen of what has kept their ministry motor going for all this time. It's brilliant.
Hey, colleagues in youth ministry. This is Dave Showalter. I'm a youth pastor at St. Paul United Methodist Church in Southern Maryland. My first 11 years was as a volunteer, and the rest have been as vocational youth pastor. What would I give as advice to my first-year self? Well, one thing certainly is know and remember who called you into it. God's the only one who should be allowed to call you into or out of something. And if you've been in this for any time at all, you'll know that there are times and situations and circumstances that will make you question your call. But if God's called you into it, then nothing or nobody should be able to call you out. So spend some time in prayer about that if you find yourself a bit down. The other thing is, I heard one of the giants in youth ministry some years ago named Rich Van Pelt say that he was down at a time in his ministry. He heard God say to him, hey, Rich, you attend to the depth of your ministry. I'll take care of the breadth of it. That's probably worth repeating. You attend to the depth of your ministry, and I'll take care of the breadth of it. That'll keep us from sometimes when the numbers are down and things like that, keeping our eyes on the focus of the God who, again, called us into this thing. I wish you all God's continued absolute and extravagant best for your ministries and your families and for you personally. Thanks for spending the time.
My name's Kenny, and I've been in youth ministry for 27, close to 28 years. And any advice that I might give, surround yourself with good leaders, good people that will help you. It's easy for us to get in the mindset of we'll take care of everything, but you just simply don't have time to reach all the needs of all the students, to plan all the events, and to take care of everything. That's why I think it's critical for us to have a good team of people that work with us and our students. If I could give other advice, I would say be more intentional on the quality of time you spend with your students and not just the quantity. For many years, people have thought that youth ministry is just trips and games, and how that's part of ministry. That's not the important thing. And you can fill up your whole life with running and doing things, but if the quality of Christ is not in the center of it, then we're missing the mark. And lastly, don't ever doubt your calling as a youth pastor. God has called us to work with students, and it's not a stepping stone ministry. And the investment you're making in students' lives today and their families' lives is going to make tomorrow a better day. Just don't give up.
Hi, my name is Jeff Perry. I'm a youth pastor in Burlington, Kentucky, and I've been a youth pastor now for 33 years. Last week, Kristen had asked me to briefly talk about what I might say to my former self when I was starting out in youth ministry, and that brought up a lot of thoughts. And if I could say anything to anybody, especially myself, I would encourage them to enjoy the ride. I've been blessed over these years to work with students and families in our church, and as we do that, some of those times are sad and some of those times are happy. I've celebrated graduations and I've also done funerals. I've gotten to do weddings of former students and watch them become parents themselves, and now their kids are starting to come through the youth ministry too. And I can't tell you how awesome that God has been for me, because his plan has been direct the whole time. 33 years ago, when I went into student ministry, I told those people at that time that I would always be a student pastor. I didn't ever want to be a senior pastor, not unless God wanted me to do that. But as it's played out and my student ministry role has continued on, it's led me around the globe. It's led me to work with some wonderful people and just to feel like I'm a part of something that is going to grow for students in the future. If you're young in the youth ministry, stick with it. It's worth it.
G'day, I'm Tim Hawkins. I've been an Aussie youth pastor for 40 years, and for the last 5 years I've been in Africa helping to raise up the next generation of African leadership. You know, when I first started as a youth pastor, I put in so much effort. We ran all these activities, reached out to the schools, attracted the kids, entertained them. I would do anything to try and get them to discover Jesus. But in the end, I realized I wasn't really trusting God. I didn't really believe Romans 1:16, where Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God to save those who believe. Somehow I thought that our activities, our programs had the power to change young people. And I had to end up trusting that God's gospel actually works. So if you're involved as a youth pastor, look, I know you're busy and I know you're working hard. But if you end up just running your whole youth ministry on man-made efforts, you're only going to achieve man-made results. But if you're trusting in God's gospel, you're actually going to achieve gospel results. That's what's kept me going as a youth pastor for only 40 years. Cheers, everyone. Catch you next time.
Hi, my name is Sam Halverson. I've been doing youth ministry for over 35 years and have been loving every part of it. And it changes over those years. And one of the things that has changed is I've realized that some of the stuff I didn't know when I was a lot younger would have helped to know. So if I were to go back and tell my younger self 35 years ago some clues around doing youth ministry, I guess the number one thing I would try to tell them is that your job is not to do the youth ministry of your church. Your job is to train and lead the congregation in carrying out their calling of ministry with youth. That there's a difference there. Their job is my job would be to help them, the congregation build relationships to work on building those relationships between every youth and the church members, so that youth know for certain when they come into the church, there will be somebody there that will know them and call them by name. I want youth to recognize that the whole church is their church and not just the youth group. So that means I would also tell myself to make a goal of at least one youth involved in worship service every single week, so that the congregation sees the youth there. The goal of youth attending worship weekly. Thank you.
My name is Dennis Robison, and I just celebrated my 30th year as a full-time youth pastor. And I was asked to send a little brief message. If I could send, as a 55-year-old man, a message to the 25-year-old me who was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when I went in my very first church, what message would I send? I've contemplated this long and hard, and it's about a 6-hour message of encouragement that I would send myself. So I'm going to try to bring it down to just a few seconds. The road that you are about to travel will be filled with extreme highs and extreme lows. Do not confuse the extreme lows as a grade or as a measure of what God is doing in the big picture. Because as the years go by and the decades go by, you will see that the thousands and thousands of salvations and baptisms are worth it all. Stay the course. Stay very close to God. Honor your family and do your best to live for Him. Amen.
Hi, this is Russell Sellers, coming to you from beautiful Western North Carolina. I'm 57 years old, and this October I will be celebrating 41 years in youth ministry. I started in 1979, and a lot of you may not even have been born yet, but I was in my dad's United Methodist Church, and over the years I've served in other churches, sometimes at full-time paid position, sometimes a voluntary position. But I've been asked to give some advice to my first-year self. And I guess number one is keeping the Word of God current in your life. Make it a number one priority. Make sure that you know it and understand it and are continuing to learn truth. If you don't know truth, you can't teach truth to the generation that is coming up now that is crying out so desperately for truth. And then I would say keep the priorities of family and then your calling. Your calling needs to come after the ministry to your family. And then I would just say, don't seek another position unless it just happens to come along and the Lord opens the door. Make youth ministry, if you're called to it, make it number one. I've never been one that seeks another position. I have always looked at youth ministry as important as a senior pastor. So I would just say, man, if you're called to it, go for it, pursue your dream, give it everything you have, and the Lord will reward you.
Hi, my name is Larry Lawrence. I've been in ministry 50 years, and this is the advice I would want if I were just getting started. Number one, take it slow. Don't try to do everything in the first 6 months. Number two, major on building relationships, and that takes time. Take the time to build quality relationships. Number three, accountability. You need to be sure. I would want to have two people in my life that have been in ministry a lot longer than me, and also some people that had more life experience than I did, and I would allow them to sharpen me. Number four, I would focus on quality, not quantity. The quantity will come if the quality is there. And finally, do not neglect my personal time with the Lord, ever. That has to be paramount in everything that I do. So take it slow, major on building relationships, be sure you're being held accountable, focus on quality, not quantity. The quantity will come, and do not neglect my personal relationship and my personal time with the Lord, so that I would live and teach from the overflow.
I think youth ministry is a calling, and therefore it is without repentance. That is, you're in it for the long haul, and you're there to manifest the love of God. That's how God wins over the world, and that's how you will win youth. Everything else is just tools the games, the picnics, the concerts, the retreats, camps, all of that. Those are just tools. It's who you are, and they know that you really, really, really love them. You're interested in their life. You care about them. You could have them just hang out with you, and they would learn who you are. They'll forget all the activities, over the years, but they'll never forget you if you really cared and you really love. That's the main thing. You got to love them. You don't have to be one of them. You need to love them and get into their world because you love them.
So like I said in the beginning, now you know why this is an episode you're going to want to go back and listen to probably once every 6 months when you need a little fuel back in your tank, just to hear somebody who's gone before you and the wisdom, and to know you can do this and you can keep going, and just the legacy that they've left. And that's where I hope all of us can be in the future.
Yeah,
because it's incredible.
And we want to thank all those who contributed. That was awesome. And you guys went above and beyond. And we thank you so much. And for all you listening and watching, we will see you next time.
Thanks for checking out this episode. We hope that it provided a ton of insight for you to create health in yourself, your ministry, and your church.
And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the Ministry Coach podcast wherever you're watching or listening. And it would mean so much to us if you would rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts.
And we'd also encourage you to share it with a friend so that it can go to help more people. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.